It can be hard interviewing a musician who's built a reputation as something of an enigma. Sometimes all the deep digging in the world doesn't really bring you any closer to that person, and at the end of it, I guess what you're left with is just their music. On this episode of the Metal Insight podcast, we're going to hear from one such enigmatic artist, the remarkable Chelsea Wolfe. Chelsea is dark rock's leading lady at the moment, no doubt about that one. She mixes hard rock, grunge, goth, electro, and a tiny bit of metal into what becomes a thriving and really emotional tour de force of sound, where music meets aesthetic perfectly. So it's no surprise that people have gravitated to her image. She's sort of like a darker PJ Harvey, black clad, eyes shaded. She's extremely alluring. But most importantly, her last two records in particular, Hiss Spun, which has just come out at the end of the 2017, and Abyss, have been nothing short of standout stuff. So this is the Metal Insight podcast with Chelsea Wolfe. I'm Earl Grey, and just before we dive in, some gigs I want you to know about very, very quickly. Something really interesting, the Game of Thrones live concert experience is coming to Belfast and Dublin, which I know a lot of you guys will love. It's on the 24th and the 25th of May in the Belfast SSE Arena and Dublin's O2 Arena, respectively. You can get the tickets from Metal Ireland's website. Also, if you just want to get pissed and want to rock out, we've got Skid Row, of course, coming up at Belfast's Limelight and Dublin's Academy. That's in early March, so you might want to get to that. And finally, the Front Bottoms play Belfast's Mandela Hall and Dublin's Vicar Street on the 13th and 14th of February. You can get all of those from Metal Ireland's gig list. So a big thanks to our sponsors there who help us along with these kind of things. And on with the show. I'm Earl Grey, this is the Metal Insight podcast, episode 43, and this is Chelsea Wolfe.
Anytime I play new songs live for the first few nights, it feels really kind of clumsy and strange, even though they're my songs, and I played them in the studio and at home. It's like something about playing them in front of people is always strange for the first time, but once you get comfortable with them, it's a really good feeling, and then you can sort of start experimenting with your voice and the way that you play them. So really it was just, it's been a process of getting comfortable with them in the live setting. So I haven't really thought about them so much as like the recorded songs. I haven't really listened back to the record that much because I listened to it so much when we were mixing and mastering and all that. But I've just been focusing on the live version of them.
I'm just thinking about, the jump from Abyss to Hiss Spun, and I sort of stuck them on back to back again today just to sort of reacquaint myself with the difference. And Abyss was a stunning record when it came out, and stuff like Iron Moon. Those are just remarkable tracks. But even so, the jump in quality to Hiss Spun was quite massive. What changed in the interim? I know obviously the band changed and stuff like that, and obviously that's huge, but within you, what changed between those two albums that made that leap so dramatic?
Well, of course they were recorded in different studios with different engineers. Like you said, it was definitely a different group of people. But if you want to talk about the change like thematically or the change in my own life, I moved, I'm from Northern California and was living in the LA area for about 7 years, and then moved about an hour above LA to write Abyss for a couple of years, and then last year I moved back to Northern California, not too far from where I'm from. So I was spending a lot more time with old friends and family, and just a lot of memories and things from my past were coming up and coming back into place, and I started to kind of feel more myself again, I think. And a lot of it musically had to do with reuniting with my friend Jess Gowrie, who's a brilliant rock drummer, and her and I used to have a band together in my hometown about 10 years ago, or over 10 years ago now. So when her and I reunited as friends, because we had some years of separation after I left the band to pursue this solo project of sorts. When we reunited, it was really clear that our musical chemistry was not finished yet. And so we started just writing songs together because we wanted to. And it was kind of clear that it should become the next Chelsea Wolfe album and not just, a side project or something. So that's why I had to kind of shake up the lineup, because I really wanted to play with, my OG drummer again, who had really, she'd really taught me a lot about music and, really pushed me to be the front person that I am today. So I think that her and I working together again had a lot to do with this. But of course, also working with Ben consistently for 7 years, I think that him and I are really in a good place where we can write really well together. We understand each other's musical sensibilities. And then, we brought in Troy Van Leeuwen to play lead guitar, and that was like the perfect match for the sort of emotional, twisted feeling of these songs. So yeah, I think there was just like some sort of confidence there in me that hadn't been there before, because I was surrounded by the people that I grew up with and the people that have supported me my whole life, instead of, in a city where I'm not from, where everyone's kind of trying to like quote unquote make it or whatever. I just feel a lot more comfortable in my own skin.
Yeah.
Back in Northern California. So yeah, long-winded way of saying that. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the drumming in particular is one of the things that comes to the front. And actually, one of the things about Hiss Spun is just the first, albums that have a strong and defining first tracks are always a bit of a treasure. You always know something good is coming from the rest of the album when there's a really defining opening track. And I would say that Spun is just, if we had been expecting good stuff from your new album, whatever it was, Spun pretty well says, yeah, this is it. This is, this is the bomb. And that crescendo at the end of it, you mentioned the drumming. That's one of the things when it just, builds and builds and builds into that thrash at the end. It must have been so satisfying the first time that you came up with that as a group.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I tend to put like a strong or one of our favorite songs to begin the album, and Spun was definitely like, it was one of the early ones that we wrote before realizing that it should be a Chelsea Wolfe record. We were kind of working on things as a side project with this group of musicians, and anyways, that was really my favorite one that we had come up with. Like just in general, the big sloppy feel of it, just like a true rock song, and then having Troy's lead on there really brought it all together. And then Scrape was really just like this exorcism for all of us, and so that was definitely something to put at the end to kind of just like have this big climax, and then it leaves you hanging afterwards.
Talk to me a little bit. There's a bit at the end of Spun where you give a sort of narration or a sort of it's not a speech or anything like that, but you give that spoken word thing there, and it's very, very hard to get at and make out the text. But what is it that you're what are you talking about in that bit? What is it that brings it to a close like that?
Well, a lot of the album has to do with my own struggles with anxiety and my sleep issues, insomnia, and just like battling with those sort of things. And so that was just kind of a bit of stream of consciousness that I wrote really kind of quickly as I was working on demo vocals. It just kind of started coming out of me, so just writing it down as it was going. And some of it is taken from Dylan Thomas, like that, or kind of a twist on Dylan Thomas here and there. And then some of it is just, like things that I've dealt with, like the prodrome and the aura is like stages of migraines, and the shadows and the sleep deprivation is a reference to sleep paralysis that I deal with. The trichomes, like trying to, self-medicate and things like that, deliriums. So it's just really like this stream of consciousness that is a lot of different things that I was dealing with on this album.
you still working through all that stuff, or have you sort of, I don't know, is that a lifelong thing?
I think so. I'm definitely working on a lot of it and trying to become a healthier person, but sleep issues are something that don't go away very easily.
Yeah, indeed, indeed. I mean, one of the other things, I've seen it referenced about the place, but you talked about Troy there and his guitar and the wail and the fuzz and just that the bends. I guess you probably know what I'm going to say, but it really does hark back to that amazing early Billy Corgan style of playing. That's just so amazing. What do you think about it? I mean, what is it about that guitar that sort of stokes you?
As I was writing these songs and how they were coming together lyrically, I just knew that he would get like the twist of them. Like it needed to be kind of gut wrenching and soaring at the same time. And some of it he recorded at home, and we were sending stuff back and forth. And then some of it he came out to the studio in Salem, and we were kind of he was just kind of playing. And I just told Kurt, like, just hit record, like let's record everything, and because it was all really, really good. So yeah, like when we were doing 16 Psyche, I knew I wanted there to be a sort of guitar solo, so I left space for that for him, and he just totally got it and started doing these like really kind of heart-wrenching, sweeping sounds, and we kind of just like cut a couple of the favorite ones together. So yeah, I don't know what else to say other than he's just he's a great guitar player, and I knew he would get it, and he totally did.
Yeah, and of course you casually mentioned Kurt there, but of course to many listeners who will be big fans of Converge and many other great productions over the years, that is of course Kurt Ballou. So what was it that he eked out of you? Why did you choose him in the first place, and what was it that he drew out? Because the sound is very different to Abyss. It's so much, I don't know, it's like Melvins in parts, or, it's just really, really dirty, while at the same time having that great groove in it. What did he eke out of you in a way that hadn't been eked out by other producers in the past?
Well, since this album is so drum heavy and there was such a focus on the drums, for really the first time, I think, in my opinion, on our albums, I really wanted someone who I knew could capture that, and I'm definitely a fan of many of his recordings and the way that the drums are recorded, and especially a more recent thing was the Russian Circles album and how he recorded Dave's drums. I really loved how he sounded, and obviously ours turned out different, but I just knew that he could capture that, and it was really fun. He had us try out like 10 different snares or something like that to find the right snare for each song, and some of the drums were recorded in this like dungeon space, and some of them were recorded in the live room. I just really wanted the sound of this album to sound like a band, and sound raw, and sound like we're playing together more, and it wasn't just pieced together. So that's kind of why I went with Kurt. Also, because I had worked with him on the Converge Blood Moon project a year before, and spent some time in that his studio in Salem, and just found I really loved the place, and I loved working with him. I really admire him as a musician and an engineer and producer, so it just seemed like the perfect fit.
One of the things that really I find just really super about your work isn't as much as it's the music, it's also the aesthetic and the lengths to which you go to really sort of express yourself on that side of the house, as it were. There's the music, which is great, but also you're quite a committed aesthete, really, if you don't mind me saying. I suppose the first thing is that cover art. It is absolutely incredible. I guess it's your concept and stuff, but where did that spidery sort of tarantula style of dress up kind of come from? Where'd you get that idea?
It was really a collaboration. I wanted to work with an outside artist for this album artwork, and I had met a guy named John Crawford a few years ago. He's a friend of mine, and he's a really great artist, graphic artist, and has worked with some really cool bands. So him and I just kind of started talking, and I had said I wanted something to kind of represent this like feeling of messiness, but also this feeling of like strength. And so he had brought up that I had used hair in a lot of my artwork before, and in different ways, and so we decided to kind of like go with that and use hair as like this representation of that, like accepting the mess of yourself, And since I was in Salem, I wanted to work with my friends that lived there. Another great artist, Bill Kristofi, and my friend Ashley Rose, who makes beautiful clothing and costume design. So I asked her to make me something for the cover art. She made a bunch of dresses that were made of fake hair, but made of hair. And Bill took some photos of me in his attic. I knew he had this attic space, and so I asked if he'd be willing to paint it all white, so it kind of felt like this clinical, clinical space where you don't know exactly where I am, but I'm just kind of cornered in this white clinical space, contrasted with this like messy hair dress that I'm wearing. So we were actually recording a music video, and that cover image was a still from the music video.
Oh,
we had a few different images in mind, and there was one that John Crawford had picked out and one that I had picked out, and I was on tour with True Widow and King Woman last year, and or I guess this year, and I was talking to Christina from King Woman about the artwork, and she was like, well, show me what you have. And I was like, well, here's the one I want, and then here's the one that John wants. And she was like, no, that's the one, like that one leaves you wondering like what's going on, and it's like kind of discomforting and scary, so it's always nice to have like an outside opinion from someone
very
that
much
you
so. It's just such a vivid image. I mean, you're just like, it's as if, as you say, you're cornered and could lash out at any second. It's so incredible. It really reminded me, maybe this is bullshit, I don't know, but one of my favorite albums in the whole of my life is Never Forever by Kate Bush, and there's this picture on the back of it of her, and she's kind of like, it's her face superimposed on this bat, or kind of I don't know, it's like a flying bat monkey thing, and it's actually really quite similar to the front of Hiss Spun.
Oh, that's cool. A lot of people tell me that I remind them of Kate Bush, which is really interesting because I never listened to her, to be honest. Like, I mean, I'd heard that hit, like Running Up the Hill, but I didn't really hear her until that 50 Words for Snow, I think it was called, came out, which is probably weird for a lot of people, but that's when I first heard her, and I thought she was really cool. But it's not like she's a big inspiration on me musically or visually.
No, I think it's an easy reference point. I think musically people see PJ Harvey or Tori Amos or Kate Bush, and they group these things together with maybe yourself. It becomes a bit simplistic, but I do check out the back cover of Never Forever, because it might actually interest you. It looks sort of close. But the other thing recently I saw was some sort of shoots you'd done for I think it was various kind of makeup artists and stuff like that, and it sort of occurred to me, this is something we don't really have at the moment in the underground. We don't really have, I mean, certainly in wider musical circles, people often do shoots for all kinds of artistic, by which I mean photographic reasons. We don't really have that in the underground. There aren't that many aesthetes. I come back to that word, but I think it's really great that you're there doing that kind of stuff. I mean, clearly it's a fascination for you. I mean, it must be something you enjoy.
Well, I kind of grew up with a lot of friends who were photographers, so it really just kind of started happening without me thinking about it. As I was coming up as a musician, my photographer friends were coming up, learning how to take photos, and I was learning how to record music. So it was just like we were just experimenting, and I would just be like a test dummy for a lot of my friends, especially my friend Kristen Kofer, who I lived with for many years. And but at some point, I definitely wanted to start taking more control and telling the story of the album, or or just something for fun, really. I do enjoy it to a point. Like I got to a point where I was like sick of my own face and I didn't want to take photos anymore.
I can imagine, yeah.
But I still push myself to do that, not because I think I'm like so beautiful or something, but because it's like it is like a way to like express yourself and express your music and push it further. So it's something that I keep pushing myself to do even when I don't want to.
It's interesting because I guess with fashion as well. I mean, I read an interview recently. You were talking about various ring choices and that your rings were very important to you, and just your ideas about fashion and stuff. And I just think these are things that haven't really gotten an airing, at least in the underground. I think for a very long time.
Yeah, and I think like some people frown upon it when you talk too much about like fashion and clothes and things like that, but really to me it's like music and fashion are just like totally linked, and a lot of your favorite artists were totally into fashion, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, I like to talk about it because I support a lot of like independent artists and smaller design companies and smaller jewelry makers and things like that, so I like to talk about it to spread the word and make sure that they're getting out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think that like for me, getting on stage is not my natural inclination. It's not my natural inclination to like get up in front of people and want them to be staring at me for an hour and a half or whatever. So, I love playing music and that aspect of it, but fashion and whatever is kind of like giving me confidence at the time really helps. And it's almost like a good luck charm to get dressed up in an outfit that you love and that you feel good about and strong in.
That's a really, really awesome way to put it, actually. And I guess I think to us as certainly metalheads, it's the same. When we stick on our tall boots and when we stick on our sort of tight black jeans and our leather jacket, it is a kind of armor. Even the long hair, beards, whatever.
Yeah,
it's all a kind of armor, isn't it? Really.
For sure, especially hair. Like I've just been like growing it for years because it's like whenever you feel uncomfortable, you can just throw your hair in your face and feel like you have some kind of barrier,
Yeah. One of the things I wanted to ask, and actually I suppose this in a way leads into it, there is always a slight reticence. I think, you've just sort of alluded to it there, but, a lot of your vocals are really drowned in reverb. Particularly, maybe not so much on Hiss Spun, but certainly in the albums before, and particularly on Abyss. But is that a kind of way of hiding? I mean, I know you've obviously painstakingly crafted the lyrics, and these are very expressive things about yourself and stuff. But that reverb is that like your hair in any kind of way? You just get to hide behind it a wee bit.
I really don't think of it that way, honestly, and I know that some people I've worked with before have wondered that as well. But when I first started really becoming comfortable as a musician and comfortable with my own sound and way of writing, it was when I started singing through guitar pedals because I felt like I was using my voice as an instrument. And I've also done stuff where it's just like acoustic guitar and a little bit of violin and my voice, so it's not like I'm afraid to show my voice, and I'll definitely do more stuff that's like minimal and more clear in the future. But I really do think of my voice as another instrument in the band. So I have my guitar pedal board, and then I have my vocal pedal board that has a bunch of other fun things that I can play with. So it's not so much that I'm like trying to hide or something. Like I feel comfortable with my voice, especially at this point in my life. I may not have always, but I definitely do at this point. And but yeah, I think for me it's more fun to like play with like the timing of delays in a song, or play with the reverb and the way that like those overtones come out in the next phrase or whatever.
I was talking to Steve Von Till a while back for one of these podcasts, and it was really, really satisfying because he really took a deep dive into how where he lived affected the creation of his music. And he's out in like rural Idaho or something, and
right.
you can just hear it percolate his music, and so I was wondering, I was reading a while back about you got a room where you like to go and stuff like that, but it struck me that I know you moved out. Were you in Sacramento or something like that?
No, that's where I'm from. I moved a few hours from there in Northern California. It's more in the mountains.
Yeah, and I was wondering if that sort of slight distance from the city has helped shape your music at all.
Yeah, definitely. Like looking back, I can really see how where I'm living affects my music. Like when I was living in downtown Los Angeles, writing Pain is Beauty, like there's a lot of reflection of that, especially in the song Feral Love. I literally wrote that beat to kind of emulate the helicopters that were constantly overhead and shining their lights in our window, and that was a reflection of that. And then, like I said, I moved a couple hours north of LA at some point into the mountains there, like the high desert area, and it was really, really quiet compared to living in the city, and it was like very jarring. And I suddenly wanted to like fill the space with this heavy sound, and so I started writing these heavy songs that became Abyss. And then, like I said earlier, I moved like in the mountains and the forest and surrounded by trees. And, I think that again, just like being close to my hometown definitely had an effect, more so than anything. But, again, I had this like the space away from people that I could just like be myself and really make a lot of noise. So yeah, I think that it affects my way of writing for sure.
Did you feel that you returned to your close to your hometown, obviously having lived a whole season of life? Did you return strengthened?
Definitely, yeah. I like growing up in Sacramento, it's a really good place to kind of like find your sound, and everyone's really, it's like a small music scene, so everyone's really supportive of each other, and it's kind of like a great incubator of sorts. But at some point I had to leave that and try to find my own way, and try to find new supporters who weren't like people I'd known for a long time or whatever. So yeah, I think like once I came back, it was like I felt like I had really pushed myself for a number of years and had a lot of experiences, so I felt a lot more
there's something in the back of my brain that says maybe Willhaven are from Sacramento. Maybe I've got that wrong. I don't know.
Yeah.
They are.
My old band played a few shows with them in the past.
Oh yeah, shit. There was one thing I wanted to say. It comes back to the thing about the sort of aesthetic, right? And it struck me that Vex, take Vex for example, right? There was like a hint of almost like mechanical animals about it, that kind of dark bass line and the sort of slightly more modern groove. And I thought, wow, I'd love to hear an album where you sort of went on a slightly more electro-y vibe, and I just wondered, was there ever any influence in that kind of Marilyn Manson sort of mechanical animals period on you, or is that a tone thing, aesthetically, or is there a tone thing that you'd like to pursue there? Because I think it could be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, another part about reuniting with Jess is she's like the 90s queen, and she loves Manson and Nine Inch Nails and Smashing Pumpkins, and I do too. So we were listening to a lot of that stuff while we were writing. We'd have writing sessions, and then we'd go to the bar and like put Soundgarden or Deftones or whatever on the jukebox. So yeah, I definitely think there's like a lot of inspiration. I was more surprised. I was quite surprised when a lot of people started calling this album metal, because in my mind it was like my 90s rock album.
Yeah.
But there's definitely metal influences there as well. It's just kind of, I don't know, in my head it was like, all right, this is my rock album,
Yeah.
But yeah, and like I love experimenting with electronic sounds, and this album definitely has a lot of that.
So that was Chelsea Wolfe, dark rock's leading lady at the moment, and as I said, something of an enigma, which I guess she remains even after that podcast. So that was episode 43 of the Metal Insight podcast. If you've never listened to this before, if you don't know what it is, Metal Insight podcast is the audio product of metalireland.com. That's Ireland, the country. Metalireland.com is the home of heavy metal and rock and the underground in Ireland, but we also do this magnificent podcast that you've been very kind to listen to. You can get it on iTunes. You can now get it on YouTube, and whatever way you like, just make sure you subscribe to get all the episodes that are coming. What can you find on metalireland.com at the minute? Well, I guess the big thing at the minute is we're all really looking forward to the new Primordial album. I guess many of us are keen to see what direction the band will choose to go after the last album introduced a slightly more rocky, slightly more traditional feel. Will they go further down that route, or will they go back to the slightly more emotional and weighty sort of post-black metal themes of old? We shall see. Anyway, that's it. Over and out. I've been Earl Grey. Check out metalireland.com, and over and out. This has been episode 43 of the Metal Insight podcast. See you soon.